Hi. Today, we're going to talk about how you can scale your enterprise IT organization by creating one front door. Before we get into our presentation, would love to quickly share this forward-looking statement disclaimer, if everyone could just quickly review this. Great. Let's get started. So hi, everyone. I'm Jay Srinivasan. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of atSpoke. We've been building atSpoke for the last 4.5 years, and we've built a modern workplace service desk. We're focused on providing organizations with a system to use for IT tickets, HR tickets, and any other support tickets. And we've built the tool to be modern, to work in today's work environment with chat, with machine learning, with integrations, and to be truly cross-team. I've been thinking a lot about how to drive better productivity at work. And that's the origin of a lot of what I'm going to be going through in today's presentation. And the sort of one-line summary of my thesis on how you can build a scalable support organization is essentially make it as simple as possible for your employees. Have one front door. Imagine a Google search bar where all someone has to do is type in what's wrong. That's the goal. How do you make it as easy as possible for your employees? Now, the origin of this presentation actually came from a webinar that I did a few weeks ago with Mike Hamilton, the head of IT at Databricks. Mike's an amazing IT leader. Currently, he leads IT at Databricks. Prior to that, he was at Salesforce. Before that, he was at MuleSoft and led IT there. And he has a deep understanding of both how a high-performing IT organization is set up, but also how to drive better employee experience. And he's been working with atSpoke now for several years. And in our conversation, a few things really stood out. One, Databricks using atSpoke uses the system across 9 teams in the company. It's not just an IT service desk. It's used for support, facilities, legal, people ops, and a bunch of other teams. They handle an immense load, 20,000 requests per month. And he has some amazing metrics that he gets out of it. Nearly 40% of all tickets that come through Slack are automatically deflected. The system automatically triages requests. But for the purposes of today's conversation, while working with 20,000 requests across all these different teams, the metric that impresses me the most is he has a less than 6-hour median resolution time across all those requests. And so in my conversation with Mike, I wanted to understand, how did you do this? What guidance do you have for others to essentially set up a scalable support organization, a scalable IT organization? And he basically said, look, you need to have one front door. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Now, before we get into how to actually set up this type of organization, I want to quickly talk about how the world has changed and how enterprise internal operations have changed over the last 5 to 10 years. And the sort of summary is how it's changed is the picture on the right. We are in an era of SaaS sprawl within your organization. What's happened over the last 5 to 10 years is you're no longer using 1 or 2 tools across the company. Instead, you're using hundreds of tools across the company. Each team is using its own tools. Knowledge is spread out across a bunch of different systems. Support teams are spread out across a bunch of different systems. And so what you have is immense fragmentation of resources, be it tools or knowledge. And because the knowledge is distributed, it becomes more and more tribal. So there's no single wiki or single repository to go for answers anymore. Everything is spread out. And on top of that, it's not just about where the answers are. It's not just about where the knowledge is, where the tools are. It's also about how people ask for help these days. We no longer have one phone line that you call or one web form that you go fill out for support. Instead, there are multiple different ways in which people get in touch with you. And chat and Slack in particular are probably the best examples of this, where it doesn't matter if you have a ticketing system because everything is going to come through Slack. And so the problem and essentially the opportunity, but what's happened over the last 5 to 10 years, is you and your teams are now dealing with immense sprawl and all of the complexity that comes with that. And this has a meaningful impact on how people do work. Looking at some stats, the average organization now has more than 100 different SaaS apps used by employees. And that's an incredible number. And by the way, this number is only increasing, and it increases with the size of company as well. So there's an immense number of apps out there. 2, in a survey conducted, nearly a third of all employees did not know where they should go to get the information that they needed. In other words, it's not just about SaaS fragmentation. People simply didn't know where to go when they needed help. And among certain knowledge workers, up to 50% of their weekly time working is spent actually searching for information and gathering information versus actually working on the information. And so this is the problem that we're trying to solve for. With SaaS sprawl and fragmentation, you're having a situation where employees can't get what they need to get their job done. And one point I really want to emphasize to this audience, this isn't just an IT problem. It is a company-wide problem. IT teams struggle with this. HR teams struggle with this. Marketing teams, data teams, support teams, facilities, everyone has this exact same issue. And in particular, with work from home and shelter in place starting with COVID, this problem has only exacerbated. Previously, if I didn't know where to go for something, I could turn to my neighbor in the office or walk by my IT colleague or HR colleague's desk and get the help that I needed. But now, when everyone's remote, this problem becomes even more complex. And so I want to emphasize that everything that I want to be talking about today is not just an IT problem. It is a company-wide problem. And the good news is you can also come up with a company-wide solution. And IT in particular is in an incredibly unique position to solve this, not just for their teams, not just for the IT team, but for every team in the company. It's an opportunity for IT to roll out solutions that will benefit the entire organization. Okay, so now that I've told you about the problem space that we're operating in and why I think we need a better solution, let's actually talk about the solution. And that's essentially this. I want to talk about how to create one front door to service and support in your organization. And the goal here is, how do you scale your internal operations while simultaneously delivering a high quality employee experience? And there are essentially 5 steps that I would urge you to take to do this. So let's go through each of these steps now. Number 1, first, you need to understand your organization at a deeper level. And what this means is literally doing a diagnostic of your tickets, your chats, and your emails to understand what's going on across the organization. A few points that I want to make here, and I'll talk through sort of what the elements of this diagnostic are, but a few points that I want to make here. Don't just look at tickets. So I know a lot of organizations, maybe once a quarter, once a month, once a year, they'll go through their IT tickets or their HR tickets, and they'll say, hey, let's go through these tickets, let's organize them, see what the patterns are, and see how we can automate certain things, how we can improve it. And the first thing that I'd urge you to do here is don't just look at tickets. You also need to look at chat channels. Look at the IT help channel, the HR help channel. Also look at email inboxes. Any sort of shared support inbox, email inboxes are also an opportunity here. So what you want to do is you want to look across all your tickets, your chats, as well as your emails. And what you're trying to do as part of this diagnostic is to understand what are things that are auto-resolvable with the knowledge resource. What I mean by that is these don't need to be tickets if the end users knew where to go find the knowledge on their own. And you're going to see that a certain chunk of these tickets, chats, and emails could have been auto-handled if someone actually found the right knowledge resource. Then you want to look for common service workflow patterns. And you're going to find that the vast majority of your tickets are actually quite repetitive. And what are the common service themes, the service workflows that you see over and over again? You want to group those as well. And then you're also going to have a group of tickets that are just unique, that are unclassifiable, and that's okay. To give you a sort of specific example, at atSpoke, we've worked with hundreds and thousands of organizations and have had millions and millions of tickets go through the atSpoke ticketing system. And when we ran our machine learning algorithms across all of these tickets and started grouping them, we found out that there are 4 categories of requests specifically for IT. And the percentages that you see on the screen are the approximate split of how these tickets are split up. So what we found was 15% of IT tickets were self-serviceable by the end user with the right knowledge resource. 20% of IT tickets across going through atSpoke were self-serviceable by the end user if they could take the action on their own. 50% of the time, 50% of tickets had to be handled by an agent, but they were repetitive. It was a known workflow or a service request. And only 15% were unique, unclassifiable. The first thing that I want to point out here, 85% of all tickets that we've seen across the millions and millions through atSpoke are in some form or the other repetitive, which means there's an opportunity for organization, there's an opportunity for efficiency. So let's now look at each of these three buckets, the self-serviceable with knowledge, self-serviceable with end user actions, and the known repetitive workflows. So first, knowledge, look across your tickets, chats, and email, look for the tickets, the categories that can be handled with basically a knowledge-based entry. This could be a file, this could be a link, it could be a shared document that you use, it doesn't matter, as long as end users can go find this on their own. And what you see here is the 9 themes that we have here, from VPN, audio, Zoom, all the way till software issues, Okta issues, and device laptop issues. These are, again, across the millions of atSpoke tickets, these are the common knowledge themes that are out there. The first thing that I want to point out, these are very obvious categories to a large degree. They're not particularly complex, but yet these are things that a lot of employees don't know how to go access. And so building out a knowledge base that covers these categories is incredibly important. So the first part of your diagnostic is to look through your tickets and figure out, okay, what can be handled with the knowledge-based entry? The next thing is to think about what tickets, what chats, what emails could have been handled by the end user on their own if they had the opportunity to do so. So essentially, what is self-serviceable? Now, the key here, obviously, is to only focus on actions that are less risky. When an agent needs to work on something, then make sure that's not accessible by the end user. It's not self-serviceable by the end user. But you're going to find that there are a lot of categories of tickets where if you have the right ticketing system or the right tools, end users can self-service on their own. For example, password resets and account access, or certain types of software access, like getting a license or getting a license to a certain tool, adding yourself to a email group, or enrolling your mobile device, or joining or leaving Slack channels. These are all relatively benign actions that take up 20% of all IT ticket volume, where if you had a way for the end user to do it themselves, they could handle it for you. The other theme that I always like looking at in these types of self-serviceable by end user tickets is, if you look at all of these, most of these are mission critical for the end user. If they're not able to get into an account, if they're not able to access their phone, it's usually a much more urgent request as well. And so this is sort of you get two birds with one stone here, where you're letting end users help themselves, so less volume coming into the IT team, so you can spend time on more important work, but also you tend to be unblocking some of the most mission critical requests for the end users. So that's the second category, self-serviceable with end user actions. The next, the vast majority of tickets are IT tickets that need to be handled by the IT team. But even within that, you're going to find that they're all quite repetitive in a lot of ways. And so what I urge folks to do here is to say, look, service workflows are different in every organization, but there are a few rubrics that you can use in terms of how you organize these tickets. So specifically, I like to think of it in terms of requests versus troubleshooting, and then splitting that up between software, hardware, applications, network, whatever other sort of systems that you have. And the goal here is, again, go through your tickets and bucket them into request versus troubleshooting across each of these, across each of the functions. Now, one thing I will urge you to do here, don't just look at your tickets, but look at chat as well. So you're going to see, for example, that in Slack or in whatever chat tool that you're using, you're going to get a different mix of requests than you're going to be getting through your ticketing system. If you just look at your ticketing system, you might think, hey, hardware requests are the most important category. But in reality, when you look at the consolidated view of everything that's coming in, you're going to find that actually things like software access are more important, except that they happen to be coming through channels like chat. So What I've taken you through is step one of the 5-step process to build a scalable IT organization. And what you've done so far is looked at all your tickets, looked at all your chats, looked at all your emails, and grouped them into what is addressable with the knowledge base entry, what is addressable by end user self-service actions, and what can be and what are standardized workflows that agents can work on. And the point here again is that 85% of all of these tickets fall into one of these three categories. Okay, great. So now what's next? Step two, you want to make accessible your operational blueprint. Now, here's the idea here. It's great that you know now what the knowledge base entries are, what the workflows are, et cetera. But what you want to do is you now want to create an operational blueprint for your organization. And the idea here is there are going to be two components to this. One is knowledge, and the second is service flows. So let's talk about each of these. The first is knowledge. So when you look across your organization, what are the most important knowledge base entries, the most important files, the most important links that you want as part of this operational blueprint that people, and what I mean by that is people know where these articles are. So the first thing that you want to do, yes, we live in an era of SaaS fragmentation. Yes, different teams might need different knowledge bases. Your engineering team might need to use GitHub. Your IT team might be using Confluence. Your support team might be using Zendesk. So yes, it could be that you're using a variety of different knowledge bases. But as part of creating this operational blueprint, there's an opportunity to consolidate. You don't need to reduce everything to one system, but there is an opportunity to say, hey, do we really need 25 systems? No, maybe let's just use 3 knowledge bases. So that's number one. Think about how to consolidate to a fewer number of knowledge bases, or at least a fewer sources of truth. That's number one. The second thing is a common pitfall that we see when people try to start building out their knowledge blueprint is they try to boil the ocean. They're like, oh my God, it's going to take 500 articles per team. And we don't think that's the right approach at all. Focus on the 20% of articles that drive 80% of the requests. And typically what we see is that 10 to 20 articles, 10 to 20 knowledge base entries per team using this system is more than sufficient. It covers the vast majority of issues. So like, for example, when we talk about VPN issues, email issues, Zoom issues, those would fall into IT's 10 or 20 articles. Create those articles. And as part of this blueprint, a very, very important step is that make sure there's an owner for each of these articles, someone that's responsible for it. And a best practice is also to set a review date. Check in on the article once a month, once a quarter, once every 6 months, or whatever frequency is appropriate. So the idea here is you have, for your operational blueprint, you have boiled down to the 30 to 100 most critical articles across your organization. There's an owner for each of these articles, and the owner knows to check in on the article at a certain frequency. So that's how you build out the knowledge operational blueprint. The same principle applies to service workflows as well. Again, don't boil the ocean. Focus on the top 5 to 10 standard workflows per team that are involved. So for IT, that could be new hardware requests. It could be software debugging. It could be a provisioning request. Come up with the top 5 to 10 standard workflows that you've determined through your diagnostic. Now, a lot of these workflows are going to be cross-team, like onboarding. And in this case, this is also an opportunity to collaborate with your colleagues across teams and just get everyone bought in and saying, hey, going forward, when we have an onboarding, let's all be on the same page that these are the steps that we're going to take. Here are the steps, here are the approvals required, et cetera. So as part of this operational blueprint creation, through the diagnostic, you know what the top workflows are, but you're also essentially laying out with your colleagues, hey, these are the steps that we're going to take for each of these. And ideally, you're incorporating this into your ticketing system. Most good ticketing systems allow you to set up workflows. Now, we encourage you to start with 5 or 10 standard workflows. But one of the things here is when you are an advanced IT leader like Mike Hamilton, this is actually a superpower. So at Databricks, using atSpoke, they actually have 131 workflows in atSpoke versus what we typically see is around 25. The power of this is the operational blueprint can continuously get better and better. And so what they're doing is as they get more and more nuance, they're able to create more and more workflows, add that in. And the benefit of this is you get more fine-grained in terms of analytics. You get more fine-grained in terms of how you think of how you service each of these workflows. Great. So we've now done the diagnostic and we've built out the operational blueprint. The next step is to set up one service desk to empower them all. This point in particular is something that I hold near and dear to my heart, which is that ticketing systems are not just an IT need. Every team in the company needs ticketing. Every team in the company needs a service desk. The HR team, the marketing team, the data team, marketing, where someone's sending out requests, whoever creates the case studies for the sales team, all of these teams need a ticketing system. And the challenge is most ticketing systems are very, very IT centric. They're built for essentially experts that know how to use them. And they're quite daunting for most other teams in the company. And so one of the things that I'd urge you to do is to say, look, let's set up a service desk for all the teams in the company. And let's think about getting a system that's usable beyond just IT. So it needs to have the power, the features, the capabilities that IT needs and relies on, but it needs to have the usability that every other team in the company can benefit from. And as you choose your cross-team service desk, also think about the cost around training and support. If it's too complex, then IT needs to get involved every time another team needs to get added to it. Every time there's a change in a workflow, IT needs to get involved. There has to be training every time there's a new colleague on the HR team that needs to use the ticketing system. And so there's always going to be this trade-off that you need to be careful of when you think about usability across the company. The other thing you should think about is considering cross-team workflows. Recognize that a good chunk of tickets and a good chunk of workflows in your operational blueprint will involve multiple teams in a company. And so think about how colleagues can collaborate on a ticket. Think about the costs related to cross-team workflows. So choose a service desk that has the power that IT needs, that's usable by everyone else in the company. Let me give you a sort of specific example of the power of doing this right. So at Spoke, one of the things that we take quite seriously is how do we build a best-in-class ticketing system that has all the capabilities that IT needs, but is still usable by every other team in the company. And the stats that I love sharing, 90% of atSpoke customers, because our system is so usable across the company, 90% of our customers use atSpoke across multiple teams in the company. 50% of our customers use us across more than 5 teams in the company. So it spreads extremely well because it's so easy to use. And the benefit of this is that when you have a system like atSpoke, you have 5 times the engagement of any other ticketing system. This is the power of thinking about a service desk that empowers every team in the company. To give a very concrete example, Mapbox is one of our customers. They have around 1,000 people, and they're using atSpoke across 16 teams. Teams like IT, teams like HR, teams like facilities, SecOps, but the data team, every time there's a data request, it goes through a ticketing system. It goes through atSpoke. Every time there's a marketing content request, it goes through atSpoke. And the power of this is by setting up this cross-team ticketing system that's so usable across all these teams, the median response time is 17 minutes and tickets are resolved within 5 hours. So incredible efficiency truly across the team because the choice was made to choose a ticketing system that is cross-team usable. Okay, so we've talked about the diagnostic, we've talked about the blueprint, we've now talked about a service desk for all the teams. Next, think about all the tools that are involved when you actually work on a ticket. The basic premise is this. The ticket, when it comes in, is where the work starts. Anywhere between 30 to 50% of IT tickets require you to actually go to another one of your SaaS sprawl tools and take an action. And that's inefficiency, that's extra steps. So think about what it would take to create one connected ecosystem. How do you integrate your other tools with your ticketing system? And so in atSpoke, our system allows you to directly take actions in third-party tools. And these are the top 10 tools that we've seen across all of our customers in terms of what needs to be integrated with the service desk. And a lot of this is obvious, right? It's G Suite, it's Office 365, it's Okta, it's JAMF. But there's also interesting stuff like Salesforce. A lot of tickets require you to go take an action in Salesforce. Well, it would be super powerful to just integrate those actions directly into atSpoke or directly into your ticketing system. To give you a very specific example here, Kyle Hoffman, the head of IT at Sendoso, uses atSpoke. And one of his favorite integrations into atSpoke is JAMF. And the reason I like this example is that 35% of the time, what Kyle is doing with atSpoke and JAMF is just doing a diagnostic on a end user, on an employee's laptop by making a JAMF call directly from the ticket. So a ticket comes in with some sort of laptop issue. Instead of then going to JAMF, logging in, and then querying this employee's laptop, what he's able to do is click a button directly in atSpoke and immediately get that diagnostic information back in the ticket. This is just one action in one tool. And if you look at his tech stack at the bottom of the screen, there's so many other tools. This is the power of building a system that talks to, that is connected to all the other tools you have in your company. Okay, so that's step 4. You want to connect all the different tools that you have. The last step is to think about how to make your system accessible to from where your employees are. And we all know email as a way to get in touch with support teams. We all know about service catalogs, but frankly, what I really want to talk about is chat. Chat is not optional anymore. Slack, Microsoft Teams, GChat, whatever you use, that really isn't an option anymore. Pre-COVID, post-COVID, this trend was there, where the new way of working within an organization is to also have chat as a critical part of how people interact. Now, the pain with chat is when you have a chat system, it's like water flowing down a hill. It's going to find the path of least resistance. And so when someone needs something from IT, they're not going to go fill out a ticket form. They're not going to go send an email and hope for a response. What they're going to do is they're going to jump on a channel or even direct message someone and say, hey, can you help with this? And this is the trouble with chat. Essentially, IT teams, HR teams, other teams are now suddenly getting inundated in 7 different ways because of chat. And my premise here is chat isn't an option. And so we should use this as an opportunity to improve employee experience. When you choose your ticketing system, when you're choosing this cross-team ticketing system, think about what has a seamless experience with chat tools, because it's essentially going to improve employee experience. The simple way I think about it is, how do you bring accountability to Slack? How do you bring accountability to Teams? That is essentially what you need to be looking for here. And the thing is, you're going to see that once chat and your ticketing system talk, you're going to see a lot of tickets there. So Policy Genius and Handshake, 2 atSpoke customers, 75 to 85% of all of their tickets go through Slack. And there are immense benefits to actually doing this. What we found was organizations that use Slack versus organizations that didn't on atSpoke, the folks, once work from home started, the organizations with Slack were responding to their colleagues twice as fast. Ticket resolution times dropped. Resolution times dropped, and response times dropped. And what's happened is, as people have moved to work from home, you've also seen an increase in volume in Slack and a decrease in volume through a service catalog or email as well. So this trend is happening. You end up delivering better employee experience. So consider how to integrate chat with your ticketing system. And so that's how Mike Hamilton has taught me to say, look, this is how you create a scalable front door for services and support. Understand your organization, do a diagnostic of what's actually being asked. Create a blueprint. Understand what the most important knowledge-based entries are, what the most important service workflows are. Set up a ticketing system, a service desk that works for every team in the company. Integrate all of your other tools into this, because the tickets are where the actions and all these other tools start. And finally, think about where employees, how employees are going to access this. In particular, keep chat in mind. The last thing I will say, I'm going to spend a minute on this. I'm the CEO of a company that's built a ticketing system with machine learning. We automate repetitive ticketing. We automate repetitive knowledge requests. We automatically triage and route service requests. But if you noticed, during this talk, I didn't say machine learning at all. And that's because I will be the first to tell you, machine learning is important, but it is not a solution. Machine learning builds on a strong workplace operations platform. It augments and makes better, but does not replace strong fundamentals. So my strong urging to you is, machine learning is important. Look for a system that offers machine learning. But prior to that, you need to have these core fundamentals in place. And if you have any other questions, if you need help with the diagnostic, if you want to talk about ticketing in more detail, please feel free to reach out or go to our website at atSpoke.com. Thank you so much.